You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator. It's also your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. A few weeks ago, I had the distinct pleasure and honor of doing a presentation on a panel at Columbia University School of Professional Studies in an event co-hosted by the School of Professional Studies and the School of International and Public Affairs. I felt very honored to appear alongside the head of the Ford Foundation, Mr. Darren Walker, and our panel was moderated by former mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, who I've known many years, and being a Philadelphian myself, or at least from Philadelphia. I don't live in Philadelphia anymore. But this panel was focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for those of you interested in hearing what took place during that panel, and it was an amazing discussion, I encourage you to look it up on YouTube, where you can find links to that session. It was an amazing session. I was, again, really honored that Columbia did it. And we were able to talk about many of the things that organizations and how philanthropy can lead on DEIA and lead on making change in the world. So you might want to check that out if you're interested in that theme. But one of the really interesting things that happened to me at that event is that I got to meet a young woman who is quite remarkable. She's a master's student at Columbia University SIPA, School of International and Public Affairs, concentrating in economic and political development and specializing in African studies. And we got to talking a little bit, and I was absolutely blown away by the work that she's doing as a master's degree student. She told me about work she was doing helping people in Ukraine, particularly people of color, Black people in particular, who were essentially trapped in Ukraine. And she was doing what she could by traveling back and forth, helping people get what they needed to get out of Ukraine and positioned in other places around the world where they could actually not only get out, but also complete their educations, because many of them were students in these other places. And the more I listened to her, the more I realized that we needed to get her on the show to talk about her work in particular, but to also understand how it is that someone so early in life could be doing such important global work. Because obviously, not many of us think that we can have that kind of impact in our lives at any point in our lives. So here she is. Her name is Macire Aribot, and she's here also with her partner, who started this organization called NoirUnited International. And it is a global development and humanitarian organization focused on centering Black and other marginalized people in their developing countries. And Nassim Ashford, who is her partner, they started this organization together. is a social science researcher, activist, and entrepreneur. He is a Jamaican American and native of Atlanta, Georgia. Nassim is a master's of public health candidate at Yale School of Public Health, and he's concentrating in social behavioral sciences. And before attending Yale, he participated in the Centers for Disease Control's Public Health Associates program, where he conducted COVID-19 infection and chronic disease surveillance for the local health departments in the United States. So both of these young people, and I get to say young because I'm not so young anymore, are quite impressive. And I guarantee you, listening to their stories today will likely drive you to want to say, what am I doing? It made me ask the question, what am I doing to really have impact, not only in the community, but in the world? So Macire, welcome. Nassim, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Art, for having us. I'm really excited to be here and to share a little bit about our work. And I'm glad that Nassim was here with us as well to talk and add some more nuance to our conversation.
Well, fantastic. It's great to have you both. Well, I wanted to just start out by asking you about your organization. And maybe, Nassim, you can just sort of tell me about the work that you're doing and how the organization got started.
So NoirUnited International is a global development and humanitarian organization that focuses on centering Black people in development solutions. And so what that means is we're working on development and humanitarian issues. Development being in the community and building up the community, empowering the community before and during times of peace or in times of just now, the time of now. Whereas the humanitarian aspect comes in when issues and crises occur. We have teams that we plan to send out in order to assist the community in times of need, such as our work with assisting African refugees in Ukraine. So it's trying to tackle an issue that happens on both sides, both where the community is being underdeveloped on the one side, and then at the same time when we have chronic disasters that consistently affect Black communities around the world, we want to have a team that's available to assist in times of need.
So this is remarkable to me. I'm still sort of blown away by this because not many people that I know have this global focus on things. So your work does, and you mentioned having teams, Macire. What does that actually mean that you have teams?
So we were founded in 2020, right after we graduated from our undergraduate institutions, Mercer University. And essentially, we are a team of 5-6 people. And right now, primarily the work that we're doing in Ukraine, it's been spearheaded by Nassim and I. And so we've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting and heavy loading for this work, but we've been able to make a lot of impact in a very short amount of time. And we've been able to maintain and remain consistent throughout the year since beginning our work. And so this team right now is, like I said, about 6 people right now, but we're attracting a lot of interest, and our goal is to really mobilize our community members and have them be engaged within our work, because, you know, the goal of NoirUnited is to center Black people into doing community development and to showing them that, you know, they can be in charge of determining their futures.
Well, you're relatively new as an organization, so I can, most organizations that have started 2 years ago are still pretty much in a planning phase. They're not really doing much on the ground. But here you are actually making trips to Ukraine. What happens when you go there? What are you actually doing? Tell the audience.
So when we go to Ukraine, our primary response is to provide students and families who are of African descent from Ukraine with humanitarian resources. So that can be food, water, material resources such as like clothing and other items needed. And then also providing them with mental health services, legal support, and advocacy, supporting their advocacy work and raising awareness about their experiences that they're having throughout Europe and, that they've been having since leaving Ukraine. And so really our work is centered around raising awareness about the racism that was faced and, making sure that their stories are not forgotten in history about how they were treated when they were leaving Ukraine.
Now, Nassim, you tell me, but do many people really even understand that there are Black students from around the world studying in Ukraine who need this kind of help?
I'll just tell you my experience. I remember it was the end of March, and I was on Twitter and I was on the news, and they said that Russia had just launched an invasion into Ukraine. And I remember seeing the news, and on the news, I saw a Black person at the train station. And in my mind, I was like, wow, there's Black people in Ukraine? My mind was blown. Like it was beyond my imagination. I didn't even think that there would be Black people in Ukraine. And so I saw the video, the clip of Black people in Ukraine. And then while on Twitter, I saw a random link, and it was talking about racism and discrimination at the border. And I was like, what's this about? And then I started seeing all of these videos of students posting about what was happening to them, and got like deeply pulled into like this whole other area of the internet and just the world. And I think without having that initial hook, people just wouldn't know, because it's not something that's meant for us to know. It's something that's kind of on the hush. And so without like organizations like us and other people that have been working in the space to advocate, and the students themselves, like the community that should know doesn't know.
Yeah. Because I have to admit, we did a number of videos on what was happening in Ukraine from a humanitarian standpoint. And no one talked about Black people in Ukraine needing help and discrimination in Ukraine and what was going on in the humanitarian side of things. So this is all new to me. And I'm somewhat, frankly, embarrassed that I didn't know more. And it's just fortuitous that I met Macire to really help me appreciate, what people are dealing with. But let's talk about some of the discrimination and challenges that Black people in particular are having in this very difficult situation for anybody. It's difficult for everybody. But to add discrimination to the elements, what are we talking about when we say discrimination? What are people experiencing there?
So to describe it to you in the most simplest terms, imagine there's 3 lines. There's one line for Ukrainian women and kids. There's one line for Ukrainian men, young men. And then there's one line for Africans and third country nationals. And for every 5 Ukrainian women that are allowed to go past the border, 2 Ukrainian men are allowed to go. And 1 African is allowed to go. People were on the buses that were pulled off of buses, and their buses were seized by Ukrainian nationals and white people, and were told to get off, and said that they had to walk to the border. They were students that waited hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, 24 hours at the border in the cold and the snow, and watched others go by. And so the experience for them was trying to find a border that they could go to that would allow them to pass, and that they could get safe entry into the next country.
Macire, are you able to connect with other humanitarian organizations that were trying to do work there? Now, I do know that some were having difficulty entering the country to do work. And a lot of the assistance that people were receiving, I'm just talking about in general now, was taking place in places like Poland, bordering nations. And that's where most people were getting help. But when I spoke to Natalie Jaresko, who was a former finance minister to the Ukraine, she indicated that not many people, there was a lot more help needed for people who actually left in the Ukraine, because many humanitarian organizations weren't actually able to get in. How did you find that experience? Have you all actually been able to enter the country? Probably not. It would be amazing to me if you did.
So we have not entered the country. However, we have been working in bordering countries such as Poland, Hungary, Germany, and essentially getting access to that area was, I would say in the beginning, it wasn't as difficult as we imagined it would be because there were lots of people coming from around the world to help Ukrainian refugees. And, they were all coming to Poland, going to the borders, going to the medical border. And essentially, we were able to interact with a lot of humanitarian actors within Poland. And after going to Poland and going to Germany and going to Hungary and seeing what happened to a lot of students, we were able to assess the reports that we saw on social media were true, and that students were facing segregation at the borders. They were being pushed back and forced to wait longer hours, longer days to cross the border. And so once confirming that, we were able to go to larger organizations like Mercy Corps, like Care International, and really tell them in detail about what we found and what we saw, and raise awareness and see what kind of help and assistance they can provide to this community that's been overlooked so far, because the primary focus was on Ukrainian nationals and other third country nationals, people from the African continent, people from across Southeast Asia. They were facing discrimination and weren't given the chance to receive the amount of humanitarian assistance that other groups were able to receive. And I think one of the key things about that was this was a moment where everyone around the world was mobilizing to support Ukraine because of the injustice that was happening. But having to be a Black person in Ukraine, or a Black or brown person dealing with the trauma of war, but not only the trauma of war, but also the trauma of racism, that takes that experience to a whole nother level of impact, because essentially when you realize that your life is in danger because there is an invasion. And then secondly, not only is there an invasion, but now because you are Black or you are brown, your life is at an even higher risk, because they're basically telling you that your life isn't as important. And so you have to wait for other people whose lives are more valuable to cross the border. And that is at the root of, the problem NoirUnited is trying to solve with anti-Black racism, and how that impacts the humanitarian space, how that impacts the development space, and why we need to be talking about it and centering it in our conversations.
Let me ask Nassim, what did you find to be the most, I would say, challenging aspect of what you were trying to do there?
I think originally our most challenging thing was trying to connect with people here in the States to share the message and let them know what was going on. We sent hundreds of emails all over and got a very low response. And it just took us to really find it within ourselves to just go out there on our own and to
What were
make.
you asking for in those? That's interesting. What were you asking for? What was your call to action in your emails?
So originally, our call to action, we were working with a group of students that were in Kherson, Ukraine. It's an area that was overtaken by the Russians early on in the war. And we were trying to speak out and reach U.S. representatives and humanitarian organizations to ask for a humanitarian corridor so that these people could get out. But the humanitarian corridor never came, and we never received a response. And so, because of that, it just kind of pulled us deeper into the mission, where we started and we actually helped to evacuate them from the area by working with Russian translators and other people that were on the ground that we met through online apps and chat rooms and stuff like that. And so we were really just trying to raise awareness and let people know that there was Africans that were stuck and had no way to get out. And, over time, we found the right people and made the connections, but it definitely took a lot of work on our part in order to find those whose mission aligned with something that we will be doing too.
Mm. And Macire, what would you say was your biggest sort of success, or the thing that gave you the most, and I'll use the word joy, but the thing that gave you the most pride, that given what you were able to do?
I think that our success story, I would go back to the beginning in March when we first went to Europe. We went there because after 3 weeks of conversation, of meeting with students who were stuck in bunkers, stuck in the basements of their universities in Ukraine, in Kherson, Ukraine, like Nassim mentioned, after being able to evacuate, help them with their evacuation through the use of Russian translators and through the use of different taxi services and bus services, once they were able to cross the border and take the train to another country, we met students firsthand that we had been working with and that we had grown to find community with. And meeting them in person for the first time and actually seeing that people who we were video chatting with or who were putting out PSA videos all over social media they were real people, and they were real students who were facing an extreme amount of trauma and, a life-changing event that they had never expected. And so being able to finally see the people we were doing this work for in person and give them housing, buy them new clothes, talk to them, and really show them that they were not alone in this situation, that there are people around the world, Black people around the world that care about them. I think that that's what was the most fulfilling moment for us all, because it showed us that this work needed to continue, and it gave us the drive to, once we left Europe, it gave us the drive to continue advocating for these students and to show them that if this were a situation in the United States, who would be the equivalent of the African students in Ukraine? It would be Black people here, other marginalized communities here in the United States that would face the same issue. And so not only did that motivate us to continue working more, but it also showed us that, like, if this could happen to one of these students in Ukraine, what could happen to me one day if a situation like this were to occur? And I would like to add that, like, another motivating part of it was because that we are also students who are studying in these Ivy League institutions, and they are also students. And so this connection between us being students and coming to these institutions to better our lives, better ourselves, help our communities, help our families, it's all rooted in the same purpose. And, because our purpose aligned really well, I saw this as an opportunity for us to support a community that's abroad and show why Black people around the world should care about the issues that are happening to us and that are affecting our communities in a negative way.
Now, both of you, I assume, have families. And my daughter, by the way, Macire, is a SEPA graduate, maybe about, 10 years or so ago. And if she told me that she was heading to the Ukraine during a war to help rescue people, I would have some concern about that. I wouldn't stop her. But I would have a lot of concern. I would be very worried about her. I would probably be thinking, well, don't you think you should just focus on your studies? Don't you think you should just graduate first? Because obviously these trips aren't necessarily helping your GPA necessarily. And also, I think about the danger associated with this, just from the standpoint of your well-being. How did your family and friends react when you told them that you were doing this, both of you? Or did you just not tell them?
Well, it was honestly a mix of a lot of things. But when we first told our parents that we had made the decision to go to Poland and meet with these people that we have been working with, they heard us and they knew that we were working on this project and that we were assisting people from our phones. But when we told them that we were going there, I think everyone was a little bit worried originally. But as we continued on the journey, they really latched on and they were there with us too. So as we were making our decisions and when we plan our trips to go back, we always consult with them and ask them, what do you think we should do? So they're also a part of this project as well.
Macire, is that your situation too?
Yeah, I mean, Nassim brought up a really good point. They are, when you talk about our team, I didn't even include my parents, but they played a big role in helping motivate us and guide us on this trip, because it was such a new experience for all of us, and we had never done anything like this before. And so I would say in the beginning, they were very supportive of us doing the work and, like Nassim said, organizing from virtually when we were trying to reach out to different community organizations in the United States. And also, like, for example, my mom, she is the president of the Basque Guinean Association, which is a Guinean American association that's focused on supporting community in Atlanta. She was able to use her contacts to connect me with Guinean associations in Ukraine, and Guinean associations in Poland, Guinean associations in France. And so they were helping us. They were supporting our wild dream. And I think, like, we have a history of always trying to do big work and be ambitious. And so I think this was, at first, to them, they thought this was just another project that we had a new interest in for this week or next week. Yeah, once we went to Poland, I think I would say for me, I kind of just told my parents as I was leaving. So then I said, "Hey, we're going to go to Poland tomorrow, so I'll check in with you when I land." And I think they were supportive. I feel like in the end they were skeptical, but both Nassim's parents and my parents were very supportive of us, and wanted to see where we were going to go with it.
Now, you were able to get other support too. So how are you getting this funded? Are you self-funding it? Are you, like paying for all this yourself, or were you able to get any grant funding or anything like that to help your organization do this work?
Yeah, we've been able to get grant funding and funding from donors. We have a grant with the Open Society Foundation and with Mercy Corps, and have got various donations from outside churches and community leaders and things like that.
So how did you manage that? I mean, it's not easy to just walk up to a foundation and say, "Hey, I got this idea, give me some money. We're a new organization."
I mean,
how did that come about?
I mean, that's honestly what we did.
That's awesome. That's crazy good. That's awesome.
That's honestly what we did. While we were in Poland, the first time meeting with these students, my mother works at Care International, and then Macire's mentor is the CEO of Mercy Corps. And so we had like these connections, and we're working, me and Macire were like, okay, well, we know these people, we might as well try and just see what happens. And so we were able to reach out through the grapevine and meet with the people who were working on the issues of Ukraine in Poland. So we met with Care International Poland, we met with Mercy Corps Poland, and we told them about our work and what we were doing. And through conversations, we were able to submit grant proposals. We didn't get every grant proposal, but we were able to work on them, and it was a really big learning lesson for us. Honestly, from like being a new organization, I feel like this year we went from phase 3 to like phase 7, So, so it was a good transition. That was a huge learning experience for us, and it allowed us to grow in a lot of ways.
So let me ask you again about your upbringing, because again, I don't think the average 20-something is sitting at home following the news, following the internet, thinking about how can I help students from Africa and the African diaspora get through this difficult time in Ukraine. I just don't think many people are thinking that way. I could be wrong, but I think what you're doing is a bit unusual, frankly. So where does this come from? What is it about your lives that have given you this unusual sort of lens on the world and the international community in particular? What is it that has given you this gift of willingness to help others in these difficult situations? I'll start with you, Nassim.
So first, I would say my family, and most significantly, I would say my dad. My dad is Irvin Ashford Jr. He's the senior vice president of Comerica Bank in Dallas, Texas, and like West Coast. And growing up, I watched my dad in the community, and I watched how everyone always said his name, Irv, 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 Irv. And it was the impact that they had on his life. I was able to see how it was just shining. It was so much shine around him and the community. And it showed me that if you're going to be in a position of power, if you have a position of power, then you have to use that power to help the community. You have to show the community that there's more beyond the struggle. My grandfather, his name was Carlisle Francis, and he was from Jamaica, and he was a Pan-Africanist, and he traveled all the way to Africa, to Ghana, and tracked our family's history to where we came from in Ghana. And me hearing the stories of my grandfather and my other ancestors that was able to do all these great things, it inspired me, and it told me that I could do something great too.
Fantastic. And you're doing something great. You're honoring them by what you're doing. I'm really impressed. Macire.
I would say that my inspiration behind this really started when I was very young. And I always saw my family, my parents, really involved in the Guinean community, helping to support newcomers who were transitioning from Guinea into the United States, helping them with their immigration process, helping them apply to school and start their lives here in the United States. And so seeing them be so passionate about their community and be so passionate about supporting people who were like them and supporting their transition to the United States, that really inspired me to commit myself to a life of service. And then also, I would say when I was younger, I think I was like 12, 13, I had the chance to go to Guinea for the first time as an adolescent. And going to Guinea, I saw some really disparate inequality. I saw my life in the United States and I compared it to to my family's life in Guinea. And I thought, why is it that my country is so poor? Why is it that people living here don't have the same opportunities that I have, or don't have the same experiences that I have? And so after that experience, I continued to challenge that notion and, really try to find answers to the question that I had, and ended up writing my college essay on the inequalities between Guinea and the United States. And once I was able to transition into university, I studied global development and international affairs. And I really wanted to know why it was that Black communities around the globe were experiencing this kind of underdevelopment that was a trend, a common theme between Black communities around the globe. And so I think that was one of the major reasons why I was inspired to do this. And like Nassim mentioned, the ideals of Pan-Africanism has been a driving force too, because, once you leave your formal education system, you don't really, like when you're thinking about your formal education system, you don't really get a chance to learn about great leaders, Black leaders who were able to do a lot of important work that provided you the space to be here today. And so I kind of view this work as a way of honoring the people who came before us and continuing the effort and the drive that they had to advance Black communities and address racism and address colonialism and the legacies of those issues, and how we could mobilize our communities to come together and see a common goal through.
So we're getting to the end, but I wanted to just ask maybe one more question. What do you say to others your age or in your generation who are thinking they don't really have the power to impact the world in any material way? They look around and they see injustice. They look around and they see problems. They look around in their communities maybe and they see violence and they see people suffering. Maybe they're suffering themselves. So they're looking around and they're seeing this and they're thinking, I really don't have the power to make any kind of impact here. What do you say to them?
When I think about young people today, young people like myself, and when they think about how they don't have any power, I would say that that's not true. And so I point back to 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement. And I mean, it was such a pivotal moment for me as a student, as a young person. And I'm sure it was a pivotal moment for everyone else as well, because that was a point in time where, for the first time, we were able to come together and protest and demonstrate how we wanted change for our communities and how we didn't want Black people to be killed anymore as a result of police violence, you know, and recognizing that that issue was not only one that was happening in the United States, but a symptom of racism and discrimination and the global policing system of Black people around the globe. That kind of advocacy was translated and seen in France. It was seen in Nigeria with the NSARS movement. It was seen in South Africa. It was seen in Brazil. So it was in places where there were Black people who were experiencing the same things. And so I think that, you know, when you look at the way that we were able to mobilize and raise awareness about an issue like that, I think that that only goes to show that, you know, we're capable of so much more, and that if we wanted to have an impact on the world, we could. All it takes is a little bit of organization, a little bit of passion and focus, and you know, we can achieve these things. And so I would just like to point back to great leaders in the past whose names still ring today. Leaders like Marcus Garvey, leaders like Malcolm X, leaders like Stokely Carmichael, who started movements and who advanced their communities at the ages of 19, 20, 21, 22. And so a lot of these things, a lot of these movements and a lot of the civil rights and liberation movements that have gone through and that have been happening throughout the past were led by youth. We're led by people who were young and who saw an issue and wanted to challenge the status quo. And I think that we should continue in working through that spirit and continue to serve our community that way as well. And so anyone can be a change maker as long as you have the drive and the focus and the commitment to yourself and to your community.
Very well said. Nassim?
I would honestly say that the power is within you. And I would piggyback off of what Macire said. In 2020, we were in Atlanta and we were a part of the Atlanta demonstrations. And while we were there, I remember looking around at the crowd and how everybody was so unified. I even started to chant, "Oh, no justice," and then hear everybody else say, "No peace," and to hear and to say all of these chants and the things that we were saying, it showed me that we actually had power and that the power was within us, and we only had to use the power we had to make a change in the community. And so I think that with anything that's going on currently in our country and around the world, it just takes us to come together as a community and to build structure, because structure is everything. And time is now. If we want to do what we need to do, if we want to build our community, we have to work and we have to do it now.
Well, I love how you say Macire was talking about movements. You both were talking about movements, which is the result of activism. But you're also talking, Nassim, about structure. And you've actually put into place some structure through your small institution, right? You're building an institution, because I think movements can get attention, bring attention to problems. They can galvanize the spirits of people to move toward change. But it's actually the institutions that do the work. They actually get the change done. They organize people in a way that they can work in a more structured and concerted way to actually get things done. So I appreciate how you move from movement to institution so that you can do this work over a long period of time, even when the cameras go away, because that's what people forget. You know, the cameras are there for a moment. You know, right now, no one's really talking a whole lot about Ukrainian refugees and relief efforts, but the work has to go on. And work goes on. When the cameras go away, the work goes on through institutions like the ones that you're building. So I really respect your insight about knowing the the importance of both. Sometimes we forget that. Well, look, I want to thank both of you for what you're doing. I think you are people, remarkable people. And I want to, real quick, how can people join you in what you're doing? Should they reach out to your organization, Noir United International, on the web? How should people find you on LinkedIn? What was your preferred way for people to reach out and connect with you? Because I'm sure there will be others who might want to say, what can we do to join them?
So anyone can currently go to our website at NoirUnited.org, NoirUnited.org. They can also follow us on our Instagram and Twitter, and also on LinkedIn as well. We are working on a community platform that will be launched next year, so we will be able to collaborate and share information amongst the community. So that's coming soon. And if you have our website and social medias, you'll be able to join the platform once it's released.
Also like to add, you spoke about movement, and Nassim and I like to see ourselves in our work as a movement in itself. And so I would just like to put this out there to anyone who's listening, anyone who's young and Black and wants to spread their gifts to the world. We want you to join us. We want you to see yourselves as part of us and see yourselves as someone who can have an impact, not only on a local scale, but also on a global scale. And we want Black people to be Black internationalists and to think about, how we can all play a part in determining, our international system, in determining the global structures. And, I think that anyone can be a part of that. And so I would just like to put that out there. If you care about Black people and you care about global issues, and you, even if you don't know how to care or where to start, we want you to come and join us. You can join us as a volunteer, or you can just be someone who wants to learn more and engage with us in our programming. And so, I'm just putting that out there. We want to build community across the globe. And our goal is to become the largest Black-led global development and humanitarian organization in the world. And so in order to do this, we need people who are ready and who are ready to make a change. And we believe that anyone can do that. And there are no special qualities. You don't have to be extraordinary. You don't have to be at an Ivy League school. There's anyone can be a change maker in their community, as long as you have the passion for it and as long as you have the determination to make change.
Well, clearly, both of you have that. So to all of our listeners, you've been hearing Macire Aribot and Nassim Ashford, and they lead an organization called NoirUnited. And you can find them at NoirUnited.org. I hope you do, because they are remarkable people, as I said, and doing great work. And to all of those who are listening for the first time, the Heart of Giving podcast is found on all major podcast platforms. And it would be really great if you subscribe to the show so you can get notifications of every weekly episode that comes up. We're talking to people like Macire and Nassim on a regular basis, remarkable people from different parts of our world doing great work. And I know you'll be inspired by their stories. Also, if you want to support the podcast, you can do so by going to give.org and making a contribution, and we would certainly appreciate that help. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you back here next week.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.